Down Cemetery Road, or as my friend Ruben from the Ruby Tuesday said, Down Cemetery Road, it has arrived on Apple TV. It's a mysterious cloak-and-dagger thriller that stars Emma Thompson and Ruth Wilson. So let's dive in. When a house explodes in a quiet Oxford suburb and a girl disappears in the aftermath, neighbor Sarah becomes obsessed with finding her and enlists the help of private investigator Zoe. The pair suddenly find themselves in a complex conspiracy that reveals that people long believed dead are still among the living, while the living are quickly joining the dead. Now, as I said, this stars Emma Thompson and Ruth Wilson as Zoe and Sarah, respectively. Emma Thompson is just the standout for this show. She is brash, rude, basically a walking example of DGAF, and it is hilarious to watch. I mean, she's not playing for comedy, but the delivery feels as though her give-a-damn is completely broken beyond repair, and she's past the point of caring. I love how natural it comes off, too. Like she's effortlessly channeling the opposite demeanors of so many of her previous roles, where she's the character who's overlooked or taken for granted and can't stand up for herself. Here she sloughs off empathy and concern, but with her talented ability, she maintains a certain softness for the character, making her very endearing and engaging. Ruth Wilson plays a mousy and semi-confident art restorer. Early in the series, she's strong and feisty, but later she becomes more timid. Now, some of it makes complete sense given the circumstances and the experiences that the character endures, but there were several times that I just wanted her to be more decisive and less wishy-washy in her actions. When she's confident, the character shines, delivering a persona that can be sympathetic and charming while also holding her own regardless of who she's facing off against. And there's a portion of her backstory that is given way more prominence than it really should have received. Mainly because the only time it's ever really relevant is for one brief scene towards the end of the show. Then honestly, the history, it wasn't even needed because the situation in this last portion was already something any regular person would react to. Now I love how Sarah is a good balance to Thompson's Zoe, bringing warmth and the softer method of concern as compared to the colder and dismissive PI. Nathan Stewart Jarrett is Downey, a mysterious character for a good portion of the show. I mean, we don't know if he's a good guy or a baddie, and despite not knowing that, his presence still is magnetic thanks to his mannerisms and his posturing. We get to see both a hard and soft side to his character, which mirrors another character in certain but then opposite ways. There's a point when he encounters Wilson and Sarah, and their dynamic is explosive, tense, sometimes deadly, but also vulnerable. Fahinti Balogun, I think that's how you pronounce his name, he plays Amos, this government spook who is calm, patient, and extremely vicious. He's got kind of a walk like Michael Myers. He doesn't run, instead just treads along with this deadly confidence that he is going to catch his prey and then finish him, even if it takes longer than anticipated. His character is also the one who is opposite in demeanor to Downey. While Downey has a ruthlessness to him, he's not necessarily a morally lacking cold-hearted killer, whereas Amos is less concerned with morality and then very intent on carrying out his mission. I do like, though, that we get to see glimpses of humanity within the character. It's a warped sense of humanity, and then also a selfish viewpoint as well. But still, come on, I mean, it's not like he's devoid of emotion, which I think then makes him more interesting to watch. Adil Akhtar is another government spook named Hamza, and his role within the government, it's vague at best. We know he's wrapped up in some sketchy crap, but what makes the character stand out is this awkward confidence that he expresses in all the wrong ways to the wrong people in just about every circumstance. Akhtar's delivery creates some good levity within the show, but not as comedic relief. It's more of ineptitude combined with a healthy dose of hubris. And at no point are we supposed to like the character, but there is kind of an endearing sort of quality to him. Now, probably that's because I just wanted to see how he was going to stick his foot inside his mouth in every new situation. Now, Darren Boyd is probably the most underused and thus unneeded character within the show. He's a high-ranking member of the government and deeply entrenched in all that has created the catastrophe that encircles the plot. The character is written, I'm assuming, to be cagey and secretive. The cigarette-smoking man that sits in the shadows and calls the shots, but is never implicated in anything untoward. What we get, though, is this pompously quiet and arrogant politician who is stoic and blah. It's not Boyd's fault for this portrayal. I'm sure he's playing the character as directed. But instead of being shady and dangerously powerful, he comes across as a stodgy white dude who's way too comfortable in his government digs and has grown accustomed to all the perks that come within operating in the grayer areas of the defense ministry. And while the character isn't massively included within the storytelling, which right there could be its own issue, at the finale, we're meant to be invested, or at least intrigued in the dude to be curious about his outcome. I couldn't have cared less about the guy. Now, the story is sad and dark, and unfortunately not anywhere close to being out of the realm of plausibility. The show does take a bit before it fully reveals all that has created the house explosion, and then the differing motives that are at play. But these are delivered to us in natural arcs that don't come across as forced exposition or awkward pauses to explain ideas to the audience. At about episode 5, we get a good full picture of the entire context. Now, we get glimpses that work to inform earlier on, but to understand the full impact the past had on characters is satisfyingly delivered to us. Like with Darren Boyd's character, the government's inner workings were shown. They're just lackluster, and while extremely vague, they don't include much intrigue or mystery. The coded conversations should have remained plain speech because nothing they discuss is obfuscated or veiled. Part of the issue comes from just seeing that perspective sparingly throughout the series. And even when we do get to see interactions, these scenes are typically less than 5 minutes total, many times lasting only about a minute, which isn't much time to devote to building out characters or giving more depth to possibly further the complexity and the creativity of the storytelling. Now, a large portion of the show involves a pursuit, and the chase aspect, it's exciting and tense. Sometimes it's a bit drawn out thanks to character conveniences and some plot protection. And there are even a few times that you're probably going to call BS on a situation just thanks to how implausible a solution becomes. But even though these scenarios existed, it wasn't enough to make the series not worth watching. And despite some of the types of scenes that we get, there are still many times within the season where we can feel the anxiety and the pressure on a character. Their stress transfers well thanks to both effective acting and then storytelling beats that continue to build on each other, like placing characters in peril or locations that have very limited escape routes. The episodes are meaty and contain a lot of drama, but they do begin to feel drawn out and extended, which then creates lulls in the pacing. I think it would have been way more effective to just simply have a few shorter episodes that only filled the time necessary rather than aiming for an arbitrary length that doesn't benefit the storytelling. And it's not like this is a consistent issue within the show. There are some portions, especially when the plot armor comes into play, that the show lingers on elements that aren't pushing the story forward any longer. Now, for me, the conclusion of the season wasn't fully satisfying. And I'm not sure if that's because they're trying to leave this open for a second season, or if the writing merely chose to maintain a vague and uncertain outcome for several of the characters. While this portion was disappointing and left me with just kind of a meh emotion, the presentation leading up to that was mainly satisfying and full of dramatic excitement and a tiny bit of unexpected levity. Overall, Down Cemetery Road is enthralling and thrilling, filled with some rich and nuanced characters who are both balanced with flaws and redeeming qualities. The pacing can drag a bit in spots. The government aspect of the show is underdeveloped and too sparingly utilized, and the final conclusion isn't as satisfying as everything that preceded it. But even with those detractions, the acting is wonderful, with the highlights being the two leads, Emma Thompson and Ruth Wilson, each providing complexity to the characters that jump off the screen through relatability and charisma. The season contains enough mystery and cloak-and-dagger to maintain interest and suspense, but also not so dramatically dark that you won't want to come back week after week. There's no sex or nudity, a lot of profanity, and then a bunch of violence. I give Down Cemetery Road 4 out of 5 couches. So have you seen any great thrillers lately? I am always on the lookout for an effective story. So let me know what you watched in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.